open this. Tonight is different. Once a month I open an older chest of stories, ones that found their way here before many of you did. Tonight, 3 tales of things that watch. A man in a hat who has been watching longer than any photograph should allow. Something beneath dark water during storms, and something that stays exactly where the camera is not pointing. La, watched from the corner, watched from the water, watched from just beyond the frame. Settle in. Some things have been watching for considerably longer than you have been looking. Most things hidden in plain sight rely on the particular way human attention works, scanning for what is expected and filtering out what is not. A figure in the background of a family photograph is not expected, is not what the photograph is of, is not what the eye goes to. Which is how a man in a hat can appear in 17 photographs across 4 decades without being noticed, until the night someone spreads them all across the floor and suddenly sees what was always there. Looking back. From the background. From the slightly out-of-focus spaces where attention rarely goes, but where someone had apparently been standing, at every occasion, for 40 years, wearing the same hat, looking at the same camera, watching the same family. A woman had inherited a box of old family portraits and photographs following her mother's passing. Occasions she remembered, and occasions that predated her. She had gone through them carefully, handling each print with the particular attention of someone sorting through inherited memory, had set aside those she wanted to keep, had spread the remainder across the floor of the main room one evening, all 4 decades laid out in sequence, intending to sort through them properly before storing them away. She was perhaps halfway through when she noticed the figure, a man, in the background of a photograph from what appeared to be a garden gathering, dark, wearing a hat, standing slightly apart from the group, looking directly at the camera. She looked at the photograph carefully. The man was partially obscured by the people in the foreground, slightly out of focus in the way that background elements are slightly out of focus when the camera is focused on foreground subjects. She would not have noticed him handling the print casually, but with all the photographs spread across the floor, she had been looking at each one with more attention than usual. And having noticed him once, she could not stop noticing him. She checked the next photograph. Different occasion, different location, same man, same hat, same position slightly apart from the group, same direct gaze at the camera. She began going through every photograph on the floor with the focused attention of someone who has found a thread and intends to follow it. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do, like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here, and that you intend to find your way back. She found him in 17 photographs, spanning the full 4 decades, present at occasions separated by years and by geography, a family wedding, a New Year gathering, an ordinary afternoon in a garden, a formal portrait outside a house she recognized as her grandmother's. At every occasion, the significant and the ordinary, the man in the hat was in the background, always slightly apart. always partially obscured, always looking at the camera rather than at the people being photographed. She gathered the 17 photographs and laid them side by side, looked at each one in sequence. The man in the hat looked back from every one, with the same patient attention, across 4 decades of her family's life. Shakoi, that patience, cold in the way of something that has been watching for a very long time and has no particular reason to stop. I wonder, have you ever looked carefully at the backgrounds of your own family photographs, the spaces behind the people being photographed? Perhaps there is someone there you have never noticed, perhaps someone wearing a hat. Granny is always listening. She showed the photographs to her aunt, the oldest living member of her family. Her aunt went through the 17 photographs slowly, looking at the man in the hat in each one. She was quiet for a long time, then said she remembered her own mother mentioning a figure that appeared in family photographs, had mentioned it only once, had said simply that he had always been there, as far back as the photographs went, that he had been there before any of them were born, that he watched but did not interfere, that he had always watched but never interfered. Her aunt handed the photographs back, said she had always assumed her mother was speaking about something she did not fully understand. Looking at the 17 photographs now, she was less certain. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder if you found him in your own family photographs. Would you want to know how far back he goes? She found the oldest photograph in the collection tucked separately at the bottom of the box, wrapped carefully in old cloth, a formal portrait, her great-grandparents on their wedding day. She unwrapped it carefully, looked at it for a long time, then turned it over. Her great-grandmother had written on the back in faded ink, a single line, "He has always been with us. He means no harm, simply watches." She turned the photograph back over, found him immediately now that she knew to look. In the background, behind the wedding guests, wearing the hat, looking directly at the camera, as he had looked at every camera at every occasion across 4 decades, and apparently for considerably longer than that. I think about what it means to watch over a family for generations, not interfering, not announcing a presence, simply being there, at the wedding, at the New Year gathering, at the ordinary afternoon in the garden, in the background, wearing the hat, looking at the camera with the patient attention of something that has appointed itself the witness of this particular family's life, and has been keeping that appointment since before any of them were born. Most presences are understood as something requiring resolution, something to be explained or removed. But a figure in a hat who has watched 4 generations of the same family from the background of their photographs, who means no harm and simply watches, is not something requiring resolution. It is simply something that has always been there. Ndania. Some watchers have been watching for longer than anyone thought to look for them. I find their patience entirely familiar. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you inherit old family photographs, spread them all across the floor one evening, all 4 decades, all the occasions, and look at the backgrounds, not the people being photographed, the spaces behind them, the slightly out of focus areas where attention rarely goes. Look for a figure slightly apart from the group, wearing a hat, looking at the camera rather than at the family. And if you find him, in one photograph or in 17, check the oldest photograph you have. Turn it over, because someone in your family may have written something on the back, long ago, for exactly the person who would eventually spread all the photographs across the floor and finally look carefully enough at the backgrounds to find what was always there, watching, in the hat, at every occasion, for longer than the photographs go back. Ndanya. Some watchers keep considerable patience. The second tale tonight is about something that watches from beneath dark water, only during storms, only when the lightning allows it to be seen. You are still here? Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder what is watching you tonight from just beyond what you can see. Isolation at altitude has a particular quality that lower places do not, the sense of being genuinely apart from the ordinary world. The particular silence between storms, the way a single light in a high window is visible from distances that would make such visibility impossible at lower elevations. Most people who staff such towers for a season come away with a heightened sense of their own smallness in relation to the landscape they are watching over, and occasionally with something else. The awareness that the tower, however isolated it seems, is not unknown to everything that moves through the high places, and that some of what moves through has been doing so for considerably longer than any current record accounts for. A fire lookout had been stationed in a high alpine tower for the summer season. His first posting to this particular tower, he had staffed others, knew the rhythms of the work, had no particular apprehension about the isolation. The tower was well maintained, adequately supplied. The log from previous seasons showed the standard entries: weather observations, fire sighting, supply deliveries. He settled in easily. 3 weeks passed without incident. Then the first major storm of the season arrived. 3 days of significant weather, low visibility, high wind, the kind of storm that made the tower feel both more isolated and more exposed than the clear weather had suggested. On the third night of the storm, someone knocked on the door. He was not expecting anyone. The supply track was impassable in this weather. He knew this from experience and from the evidence of the storm itself. He went to the door, a figure outside, difficult to make out clearly in the weather, a traveler, the posture and the presence of someone who had been moving through difficult conditions and had found a light and come to it. He opened the door. The traveler came in without excessive gratitude, simply the quiet relief of someone out of the weather. He offered what he had. The traveler accepted. They sat by the small stove, spoke very little. The traveler offered a name when asked, gave brief answers to the few practical questions he raised, and otherwise sat quietly through the night in the particular stillness of someone entirely comfortable with silence. He fell asleep in his chair in the early hours. When he woke, the traveler was gone. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here and that you intend to find your way back. If you have a story of your own, Granny is always listening, watching, waiting. He found the entry in the log before he found anything else unusual. The traveler's name written there, in the log, in the entry for that night, in handwriting that was not his. He had not written it, had not seen anyone write it. The log had been on the table through the night, and he had not watched it continuously, but he was certain, in the way you are certain about things in small enclosed spaces, that no one had written in it while he was awake. The name was there, his handwriting was not. He looked at the entry for a long time, then began going through the previous season's logs stored in the tower's record cabinet, looking for the name. Izui, that search, uncomfortable in the specific way of looking for something you are not certain you want to find. I wonder if you found a name written in your log in handwriting that was not yours, would you search the records, or would you close the cabinet and not look? If you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening. He found the name in the records going back further than he had expected to look. Same name, same date. The date of the storm, the third night of it. Same handwriting. Not his, not any of the previous lookouts whose entries he could compare it against. Different handwriting from all of them. Consistent with itself across every appearance. The name appearing on the same date in storms going back through every season the records covered. He pulled the oldest records from the cabinet, found the name there too, written the same way, on the same date, in records that predated the tower's current structure. In records that predated, he eventually realized, the tower's staffing by any person whose name appeared in any official registry he could locate. Shak Koi, the oldest record in his hands. Cold in the way of something kept in a cabinet for much longer than a summer season. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder if the same traveler knocked on your door during every storm, and you never saw them arrive or leave, how many storms before you stopped opening the door? He did not stop opening the door. This is the part of the story I find most worth sitting with. He completed his season, filed his reports, and in his report, the standard end-of-season documentation, he included a note about the tower's visitor log, about the name, about the records going back beyond the tower's official history. His report was received, acknowledged, filed. He received in return a brief response from the relevant authority. It said simply that the entry he had described was a known feature of that particular tower's records. that previous lookouts had reported the same visitor on the same date during significant storms, that the name in the log was considered part of the tower's history, and that he should continue to open the door if the visitor came again, which the authority apparently expected it would. Some visitors are expected by those who have been keeping records long enough to know. I think about what it means to be expected. The name in the log, the same handwriting, the same date, the same storm, going back further than the tower's official history, and the authorities' response, continue to open the door. As though the visitor's arrival during significant storms was not an anomaly to be investigated, but a feature to be accommodated. Part of the tower's history, known, expected, and the lookout alone in the high place, with the wind and the storm and the small stove and a traveler who sat quietly through the night and left before morning and wrote their own name in a log in handwriting that belonged to none of the living. Some things have been making the same journey for long enough that the people responsible for the high places have learned simply to leave the door unlocked. I find this the most honest response available. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you are staffing a fire lookout tower and a storm comes in, and on the third night someone knocks on the door, open it, let them in. Offer what you have. Sit by the stove through the night. Ask the name when it seems appropriate. Do not ask too many other questions. And when you wake and find them gone, check the log. If there is an entry in handwriting that is not yours, search the records cabinet. Go back as far as the records go. Find the same name on the same date in the same handwriting going back further than seems possible. Write it all in your end of season report. And when the authority writes back to say it is a known feature of that tower's history, that previous lookouts have reported the same, and that you should continue to open the door if the visitor comes again, file the response. And in the following storm season, when the third night arrives and someone knocks, open the door, because some visitors have been making this journey for a very long time and have simply come to expect that the door will be opened and the stove will be warm, and someone will sit quietly through the night with them until morning. Ezui, some watching is more deliberate than we allow ourselves to believe. One more tale tonight about something that stays exactly where the camera is not pointing, all afternoon, without ever being caught. Bamboo forests have a particular visual quality that other forests do not. The density of the stalks, the way they filter light into specific qualities at specific hours, the sound they make in wind, a hollow resonant sound quite unlike the movement of leafed branches, and the particular corridors of shadow they create. Long, narrow, converging at distances that the eye cannot quite resolve. Most of what moves in bamboo forests is wind and the forest's own adjustment to it. But the corridors of shadow have a quality that invites attention. That makes the eye search the depth of them for what might be moving there. And occasionally something is. That would rather stay in the space just outside where you are looking. A woman photographer had gone to a bamboo forest to work in the particular quality of late afternoon light it produced. She had photographed there before and knew the space, the main paths, the areas of dense growth, the clearings where the light gathered differently. She arrived in the mid-afternoon and began working. The forest had its usual quality, the hollow resonance of the stalks in the light wind, the particular corridors of shadow between them. She had been working for perhaps an hour when she first noticed the figures, at a distance between the stalks, moving slowly, slowly enough to register as deliberate movement rather than the forest's own adjustment to wind. She stopped, looked carefully. Too tall for animals, too still for people passing through. She raised her camera. She photographed in the direction of the figures for perhaps 20 minutes. They did not approach, did not recede, simply maintained their position between the bamboo stalks at the same distance, moving occasionally with the slow deliberateness she had first noticed. She could not resolve them clearly enough to identify what she was looking at. The bamboo between her and them was too dense, the light at that angle too filtered. She moved to a better position. They adjusted, not dramatically, simply maintaining the same distance and the same degree of obscurity as she repositioned. When she moved, they moved, not toward her, simply maintaining the relationship. She photographed continuously. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here and that you intend to find your way back. If you have a story of your own, Granny is always listening, watching, waiting. The figures were in none of the photographs. She reviewed them that evening, all the images from the afternoon, including the 20 minutes she had spent deliberately photographing in the direction of the figures. The bamboo was there. The light was there. The particular corridors of shadow were there. The figures were not. She went through each image carefully, enlarged the relevant sections, found nothing that corresponded to what she had seen. She was certain she had seen something, had tracked it across 20 minutes of deliberate photography. The photographs contained no evidence of it. She was about to close the review when she noticed something in the background of one image, something that had not been the subject of the photograph. In the spaces between the bamboo behind where she had been pointing her camera, she looked at the next image, the background again, the same spaces, something there also. Shakkoi, the screen in front of her. Cold in the way of understanding that what she had been photographing had not been what was photographing her. I wondered if something had been staying precisely where you were not looking all afternoon, how long before you noticed? And what would you do with the photographs that showed it was there? If you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening. She went through every image from the afternoon. In each one, in the background, in the spaces between the bamboo she had not been photographing, Something was visible, consistent across all the images, positioned just beyond where her camera had been pointing at the moment each photograph was taken, as though it had known precisely where her attention was directed at every moment of the afternoon, and had stayed just outside that attention, consistently, precisely, for several hours. She looked at the images in sequence, the something in the background moving as she had moved through the forest, maintaining its position relative to her angle of attention with an accuracy that required either extraordinary coincidence or deliberate awareness of exactly where she was looking. Izui, the sequence of images, uncomfortable in the specific way of evidence that points clearly to a conclusion you did not want to reach. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder if something had been staying just outside your field of attention all day. What do you think it was doing there? She did not return to the bamboo forest. This decision she described not as fear exactly, more as the particular respect one develops for a space that has demonstrated it understands the rules of attention better than you do. She has shown the photographs to others, to people whose professional judgment she trusts. None have been able to identify what appears in the backgrounds. None have been able to explain how something could have maintained such consistent positioning relative to her camera angle across an entire afternoon without her direct awareness. She keeps the photographs, reviews them occasionally, each time finding the same thing in the same positions across the sequence of images. Whatever spent the afternoon staying just outside her attention has left a very thorough record of having done so, in every photograph she took, of something else. Nda. Some things are most visible in the spaces we are not looking at. I have found this to be consistently true. From where I sit, watching the corners of rooms, I think about attention and its edges, about the space just outside where we are looking, the peripheral, the background, the areas our focus moves past in the process of directing itself somewhere specific. Most of what occupies those spaces is simply the world going about its business in the areas we are not currently interested in. But occasionally something understands the edges of attention with a precision that suggests deliberate navigation of them, staying just outside the frame, maintaining the relationship between its position and the direction of the camera with an accuracy that requires knowing exactly where the camera is pointing at every moment, and leaving a record of this navigation in the background of every photograph taken, of something else, entirely. Some things prefer the background. I understand the instinct completely. I have been watching from corners and edges for a very long time. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you photograph in a bamboo forest and you notice figures moving between the stalks, tall, slow, deliberate, photograph them. Spend as much time as you need, move to better positions. They will adjust to maintain their distance and their obscurity. And when you review the images that evening and find nothing in the directions you were pointing your camera, look at the backgrounds. Look at the spaces between the bamboo you were not photographing, because something that understood precisely where your attention was directed all afternoon has left a record of where it was standing, in every image, in the background, just outside where you were looking, consistent, precise, deliberate. Whatever it was doing in the bamboo forest, whatever it was there for, it was aware of you, of your camera, of your angle of attention at every moment, and stayed just outside it all afternoon, with a patience that suggests it has been doing this for considerably longer than your visit. 3 tales. One evening, beside the kotatsu, watchers, all of them, from the corner, from the water, from the edge of the frame. I wonder how many things have been watching you tonight that you have not yet noticed. If these stories stayed with you, if the dark or the shadow feels a little closer tonight, you know where to find me. I am always here beside the kotatsu, watching, waiting, and if you wish others to find their way here too, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. I would not object. And if you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening, and I'll see you tomorrow for something shorter.